two, 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 two. Is this one? Check, 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 check. Okay. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Two, two. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Two, two.
No, 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 no. Oh, yeah. I'm in chains, you're in chains too. Our uniforms and you are uniforms too. I'm a prisoner, you're a prisoner too, Mr. Jailer. Oh, I have fears, you have fears too. I'll die, but you self will die too. Life is beautiful, don't you think so too, Mr. Jailer? I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let he is without sin be the first to cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. Mr. Jailer, man, you suppress all my strategies. You oppress, whoa, every part of me. What you don't know, you're a victim too, Mr. Jailer. Oh, you don't care about my point of view. If I die, another will work for you. So you treat me like a modern slave, Mr. Jailer. I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let me hear you without saying be the first to cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. Mr. Jailer. You see, if you walking in the marketplace, don't throw stones. Even if you do, you just might hit one of your own. Life is not about your policies all the time. So you better rearrange your philosophies. I'm going to your fellow data. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let me hear you if you found me. Be the first that cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. Oh, I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let me hear you if you found me. Be the first that cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. Mr. Jailer. I have a baby say, I wanna be president. I want your money from my government. When you don't know what you want, then when you get know. Yeah, yeah. We don't have to go 360 degrees. Now it's time we go the 180. You don't have to climb the highest mountain. For all you're looking for is revenue. Open the eyes of your mind, your ears and mouth as I sing my song. Open the eyes of your mind, your ears and mouth as you hear hastily in yesterday. Many today don't waste away, but nevertheless it's never late. Oh, see the times have changed. I thought you knew that this world will never ever wait for you. The world has gone past times of fighting, so drop your guns and your swords and let us live all as one. We all need love and understanding, so drop your guns and your swords and let us live all as one. Oh. Ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee, ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee. I'll be waiting. Oh, I'll be. Oh, oh, oh. Every nation, across the ocean, is more than just a goddess. We all need one another. Oh, oh. Ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee, ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-dee. I'll be waiting. I'll be waiting for you. For you, you, and you. I'll be waiting for you. Every people, wherever you be, it's more than just a color. We all need one another. I wake up, I see you as you leave. I feel it, I see it as you leave. When we kiss, I went deep, but you're far away. Everything treated me like I was a queen. What spell did it cast on me? Or was it a make-believe? You say, girl, never be afraid of ever loving me. Those words I hung on to. Oh God, I was a fool. You became my bad habits, keeping up appearances so you could notice. Even when you suddenly picked the things and left the keys, that's crazy. ti sọ̀rọ̀ mi f'Olúwa. Kò sọ. Ìwọ nìkan ṣoṣo. 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 Oh, ìwọ nìkan ṣoṣo. Ìwọ nìkan ṣoṣo. Ìwọ nìkan ṣoṣo. When I'm crying, when I'm tired, just leave me alone. I don't cry your river. I don't wanna fall. Just leave me alone. Leave me every day. Every day's not a holiday. My life's like a subway. Oh, I know this love don't last. Look at me, tell me what you see. Do you believe this love is real? Oh, I know this love don't last. I've come from far away to see these go down the drain. I waited patiently, and this is what I get. Emotional, offending me. My whole wide world is giving in. I'm not so free to express myself. The woman in me, whoa, don't fade away. My mama said, baby, be careful. If anybody come to say I love you, My papa said, baby, I want you. If anybody come to say, I love you, Now you're asking me to trust you. Tell me how am I supposed to when I know this love don't last? Could it be kind of love that my mom used to warn me about? Oh, how will I know that his love will last? Oh, I've come from far away to see these go down the drain. I've got so much to give, but I don't know what I'll get. Oh, emotional, offending me. My whole wide world is giving in. I try so hard to express myself for the woman in me. Whoa, don't fade away. My mama said, baby, be careful. If anybody comes to say I love you, My mama said, baby, I want you. If anybody comes to say, I love you,
Yes. Greetings. Greetings, everyone. My name is Kumba Ture, and I'm the chair of the board of Trust Africa. And as you may know a little bit about Trust Africa, it is a Pan-African foundation born from really the dreams of people like you, like us, who believed that Africans needs to come together, have agency on our own lives, and build institutions that survive us. And here we are, 20 years later. 20 years later, this institution is here. And we hold our board meetings in Senegal, where our main office is, but in several other countries on the continent. And every time when we meet as board, we do our best to engage people in the places where we are, in conversations that are connected with the current issues that we live in. So this particular gathering is in that line of making sure, one, that we don't come as board and meet here in Abuja, our capital of West Africa, without meeting some of you, but also taking the time to have meaningful conversations about being African in this time. So I want to thank the moderator. I'm going to call on our keynote speaker, our board member, and I want to thank every single one of you for making the time and for coming to respond to this invitation for this conversation. It is a gift that you are granting us, the gift of your time that we value so much. On the conversation itself about the time that we are in and the crisis that is happening around the world and our own situations as African in it, I will let our board member and big boss, Abdoulaye Jani, come and do the keynote. The only thing I would say is that as African, we are sadly used to crisis. Very sadly. Yes, it's a global crisis. People are screaming everywhere, but it's been hundreds of years of crisis for us. And we are still here. So maybe the world has something to learn from us on how to handle and how to survive in crisis times. I would like to underline also the fact that even today, as we speak, many African people are struggling on this continent. Not only about, the war, we talk about Sudan and South Sudan, and we have to name it. But there are even more silent and invisible crises daily, because we are the one who still die from preventable disease. No bomb dropping, and we're still dying. We are the one who struggle in terms of people living under very dire situation in terms of poverty. So to me, then everything else that is happening today around the world goes again and pushes even sometime further in those difficulties and those crises. So I hope that in this conversation, in this connection, in this work that we'll be doing, we can come up with thoughts, with ideas, with connection, with work that will help us serve our people on this continent, but that will also inspire the rest of the world to come back to humanity. In many ways, we are the cradle and the beginning of humanity. So, in the name of all of the members of the board of Trust Africa who are here, all of our founders, all of our staff, all of our supporters, I want to welcome you and thank you once again. Abdoulaye Jane, I would like to invite you. And yes, there's one thing I really wanted to say, which is we underlined it this morning about the UN resolution in making, speaking to slavery as one of the crime against humanity. I cannot take the floor in public without naming this, because it speaks to the core of who we are and what brought us here. And it is something that not only do we need to celebrate, but that we need to keep working on, pushing towards reparation. This was one thing I really didn't want to have the floor without naming it. And I want to thank every single body who worked on this, made it happen. And you stay tuned with us in this 20th anniversary of Trust Africa. We'll be speaking more about this, and you'll hear more about this. Thank you, Mr. Jane. Please, for your keynote.
Good afternoon, everybody. And as Kumba said, we are happy that you can join us. I need the mic. Are you hearing me? You are. Okay. I was invited by the Director General of Trust Africa to come and say a few words on the impact of the ongoing global crisis on Africa. I left Dakar. I was based in Dakar, and I came back here. And I thought I would prepare something before I come before this august body. But Kumba and others kept us busy, so the only thing they let me have is lunch. So I just came from lunch. So if I'm incoherent, please forgive me. Please forgive me because of this lady and this gentleman here. I was asked to talk about the impact of the Iran crisis, the impact it has on Africa, on African people, and the suffering that it's inflicting on us. First, let me just preface my intervention by saying this is a criminal act started by another country, independent country in the eyes of the United Nations, where I have been a staff member for 20 years, and it is a destruction of existing rules and regulations, of existing norms, which really, it's really destroying the rules and regulations and understanding that this world has put together since 1945, and which is just being eroded. It's been eroded, and the institutions that were created by the adoption of the rules and regulations that the United Nations is the most credible representative body in the world is meaningless now, to a great extent. Meaningless. It was the institution is the institution that gave equality between nations. It's the institution where we are all equally represented and we had a voice. That institution is dead. It is dead. The UN itself, given what happened and its ability to deal with it, is a condemnation of that institution. Not the institution passed by itself, but by the actions that have been taken now. So it is sad. It is sad, very sad, that we can get up one morning and say we are going to destroy another country. It is intolerable. And if you see that what is happening now, it's just a follow-up of what happened before. Recently, that a country went into another country, arrested the head of state of that country, blindfolded the United States, and is trying him. It's incredible. It is another example is where we went into Palestine. My friend here just gave me 600,000 people. The UN, impotent, couldn't do anything about it. So it is, and then the president he arrested fuel to another sovereign country. And they stopped that happening. And Cuba now is in darkness on a daily basis. So those are the consequences of what this war has brought into us. But the war is more terrible. The war, they went into a country, assassinated the leadership of that country, eradicated the country, virtually wanting to say, we will bring down this country to wipe out our civilization and so on. So when we are looking at what this impact is on Africa, we should see it in this global context and see that really it is a universal problem. How we deal with it, I really don't know. But it's a colossal miscarriage of justice. It's a colossal of the law of the jungle, where might is right. You get up and say tomorrow Nigeria would not exist, and they try to bomb us. It happened before, and they said Muslims marginalizing Christians in Nigeria, and therefore we will attack Nigeria. I mean, what does this mean? What is this? What does this say about universal justice, peace and security in the world? I mean, it's terrible. So it is in this context that I want to share a few thoughts with you as to in acceptance of this move, and then what impact it has on our continent. It's totally not acceptable. But who is talking about this? Nobody is condemning it. Maybe a little bit from the Arab world, but nobody is saying damn about that. But what is it doing to Africa? What it's doing for Africa is what our sovereignty is now, and what are the implications as we move forward. It's daunting. When I think of it, it's daunting. Now, the economic effect of this war on us, a war we did not create, it's just colossal. Prices are going up. Most important is food prices and fuel, which drives every economy, which is of interest to every human being in the world. It's deteriorating at a time when really times are hard for us. Times are hard for us. We are putting things together is terrible. But maybe we say we are suffering because certain things we don't have access to and so on. But think of people in Iran. Think of people in Iran who really are just being wiped out. Leadership is being wiped out. The infrastructure is being eroded, and it's just daunting, mind-daunting as to what we do. So these are serious implications for us. I say we are suffering because we don't have access to vital commodities, and it will continue to get worse until such time that the people who are perpetrating this feel it's about time. We have done enough destruction to stop this. When that will happen, we really do not know. But it's something that all we can do is to condemn it. But the international world is not saying anything. What they have decided that those who have the might and the power, that they will not join this suicidal mission on Iran. But they are not saying, they are not condemning it. We haven't had it being condemned anywhere. They have not condemned it as we condemned the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, unless you are part of this. So nobody is saying anything. Nobody is saying any condemnation. So it is bad precedent for us, bad precedent for Africa. So you are an African now. You have critical minerals in your country. Those who use these critical minerals don't need them for some critical machines and equipment that they have. And somebody wakes up and says, Democratic Republic of Congo, you have critical minerals. Sell it to us or we invade you. Who is going to say yet about it? Nobody. This can happen to us. So we should not feel comfortable as to what's happening. This is, as I said, it's happened in Venezuela, it's happened in Iraq, it's happened in Jerusalem, not only Jerusalem, but in Palestine. And where somebody said, we will eliminate Palestine, we will not only eliminate, but we will build a resort there. Who is condemning that? So you have to see what's happening in that global context. And there are many examples. And unless something is done, there's nothing we can do about it. And I don't think anything will be done. The body that we relied on to do this is the United Nations. United Nations is functional, but it is not living up to expectations. It is afraid to live up to expectations and so on. So what do we say? Now, on Africa, what are the other implications for Africa? I said it questions the continued relevance of our military, of our defense. What do? We are in there. Somebody invades another country. We're not saying anything, but it is, as I said, this reflects on what our security situation, our military, what is their function, or what do they do? I don't think we have any military guys here, but if there are, my apologies to you. The military can get up and say, we have the might, we would reverse democratic dispensation in our country, and we'll take over. And it's happening everywhere. It's happening in Burkina Faso, it's happening in Mali, it's happening in other countries. Niger, where I served for 5 years as UN representative. Nothing happens. So even this should enable us to question, because I'm talking about the impact on Africa, this should question really continued relevance of our military, of our defense forces, and what they can do to protect us. What? So it is abominable, it is shameful, but our sympathy lies with Iran. And I'm not taking sides here. We are humanitarians. We cannot sit and not sympathize with people being decimated, people have been threatened that really we will wipe out you, you will not be part of civilization anymore, and so on. So what craziness is this? What can we do about this? So let's not be parochial. Let's not just sit here and say, what can we do? Nothing. If we can mitigate to a great extent the suffering of people, and I've told you the suffering is basically the erosion of our power to have goods and services, essential goods and services, fuel, food, and other things. Now it will soon become beyond us once this war is not stopped. It will come beyond us. We will not be there, we will sit and so on. So it is, I want to listen to you and say, what do you think we should do? We should raise our voices. Nobody will listen to us. With our governments raise their voices, they are not doing so, and nobody will. The United Nations is incapable of the Security Council that they put up and said it is the institution that will deal with global crisis. It's not saying anything and so on. So, talking to you today, I just feel maybe I'm wasting my time or your time. Really, we can discuss it. We can say this is not right. This should not happen. Our voices will not be heard. We are marginal and so on. But I say repercussions are that this could be repeated anywhere. The thing that comes to my mind is our critical minerals. So what should Africa do? Africa should look at who their trading partners are. We have now the African Trade Agreement that we signed. 50 of the African countries have signed it together. So if those goods and services that we feel we'll have access to and is being provided by African countries, we should trade amongst ourselves first. Let's not sell our petrol, our gas and others to any other country without really Africa coming together. Angola says, I will supply Burkina Faso before I sell to the United States or before I sell to the UK and so on. But we have to look at those critical goods and services that should form the critical part of this trade agreement that we have. And then we prioritize African markets. Nobody will blockade us. I hope so. Nobody will blockade us. Nobody will. And then we will be able then to provide those goods and services of critical value to our African countries. That for me is fundamental. Prioritize the activation of the free trade area within Africa. Look at those commodities, goods and services that we can trade ourselves, amongst ourselves. It is critical. Yeah, if Angola has so much fuel, Nigeria has so much fuel and petrol that it can service the rest of the continent without really impairing the source of great revenue to the countries. The African Union must stand up and say, and we are not doing that because they are doing that in the light of what is happening, in the light of we're having difficulties in accessing these things. So let us go back and rethink how we distribute the goods and services that the good Almighty has given us. We go back, we think about it, we put in mechanisms which ensure that in crises of this nature, we do not suffer collateral damage. Collateral damage because somebody decides to stop Venezuela from exporting its oil, and that Africa suffers from that. When we have maybe as much oil, if not more than Venezuela, our collective supplies are more. So let the African Union put in mechanisms, encourage African countries to be able to trade amongst themselves on those critical elements. If not, really, this is a bad example. This will continue to impair severely on day-to-day life in our African countries. This will continue to rob us of essential commodities that our continent needs. Commodities due to interference, due to illegal invasion of countries and so on that we can do nothing about. So the only thing we can do about is Africa getting together, looking at our trading partners, our trading patterns, and we prioritize those critical goods and services for which we have abundant supply, but it's not every African country that's endowed with this. So we should do this and prioritize it. And then the rest of it, if you want to sell to anybody, to Japan or any country, that's the right of those countries that have those, but give priority to the African market. The mechanism is there now. It has been validated by maybe 50 of the African countries, of the 54 African countries and so on. So the African Union should prioritize this activity. They don't have the guts to condemn what's happening in Iran, but they have the guts to say, let's get together and minimize the impact of this. Whether you call it illegal war or call it whatever you want. But we are saying, given what is happening there, how can we mobilize ourselves together? That maybe for this particular one is too late, but we learn from it. And we put in mechanisms, we put in initiatives that will minimize the impact of African countries. And we are in Nigeria. Maybe Nigeria can take the lead in this, push the African Union to do so. They have enough fuel, they have enough food, they have enough of many things that Nigeria can help. But they should encourage other African countries to join this bandwagon, this vital bandwagon, which will shield us from the destruction that's happening in other countries that they don't have minimal impact or reduced impact on the future of our continent. So as I told you, I was drafted to come and say something today. I went for lunch, and this lady sitting next to you was harassing me as to what I eat. And I said, but she harassed me. So I thought that despite that I found the energy to come and talk to you. I had nothing. I didn't prepare anything. I just thought I'll come and talk to you, because when I look around, I see some bright people around. So let's make this the start of a debate. I don't have all the answers and so on. I can tell you what is happening to our continent, but let me listen to you too, and you see what is it we could do to impact, to minimize the impact of this illegal action, of this terrible thing, which is impacting another African country. I'm not an Iranian, I don't know Iran, but it's what's happening to them, and injustice, wherever it takes place, should be condemned. Wherever it takes place, we should try to minimize the impact on other countries that have nothing to do with it, even on the countries that are sharing this belligerent act together. But we should shield our countries, and we have the ability and the capacity to be able to put in place mechanisms that would minimize the impact. As I said, for me, the African free trade mechanism is the best mechanism that we could use to impact this. Let me stop here. When I start talking, sometimes I just go on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jan, please give him a hand again. And do not listen to him when he's saying that I'm preventing him from eating. Okay. I did not prevent him from eating what he wanted to eat. I'm just checking on the good health of my board members. And they have food protocol that they don't sometimes respect, and I just check on it. But he wants to pass a motion that as a board chair I cannot speak to. We'll see. It's a mandate. It's a mandate. It's a governance issue. Thank you so much, Dr. This is difficult time. You've repeated several times. I'm just gonna call on Professor Jibrim Ibrahim, Senior Fellow at CDD West Africa, to come and join. And we have Dr. Dauda Garuba, also Executive Director of CDD West Africa. Yes, please. We have our very own board member, Sibongile Makabela, Trust Africa Board from South Africa. We have Marwa El Dali from Egypt, also member of Trust Africa, to hold us in this conversation. Marwa, and I will pass you this mic, and I think there are other mics. Hakim has excused himself, but he'll be right back, and I think he wants to speak from the floor. We have some technical issues. Yes, there is a microphone on the table, but let me this mic.
Good afternoon. For those comments, you know, the good thing is that he didn't write a speech. He's a diplomat. Speech is usually diplomatic emptiness. But when he talks from the heart, then he says what he actually means. So a speech. And the issue you raised is fundamental. We are facing a major global crisis. It has a huge impact on our society, and we need to respond. If you can summarize Jani's thoughts in one sentence, he's saying we should respond to Lenin's question on what is to be done. My introductory remarks would draw from the conversation I had. With a student comrade when we were in 1985. My next door colleague is called Ebrima Sal. At that time, we had a very simple approach to issues. We must smash imperialism. We must carry out the revolution. That was the stated objective. And it's very interesting. I was looking at Ebrima Sal's TV. The last 20, 30 years, imperialism has disappeared from his scientific work. And I think for a lot of us also, it's exactly the same. At that time, and we got more and more wrong over as the years moved on. But what I specifically remember about Ebrima is that we were discussing the nature of imperialism. And he said imperialism is a paper tiger. I said, but it's so strong, it's killing everybody. He said, you don't know, it's because you are only a Stalinist. We are a Maoist, Marxist-Leninist. They are studied in their study group imperialism, and the example of China, Vietnam, etc., showed once you mobilize the social movement, once you have the workers and peasants behind you, you can smash imperialism. That was Ebrima Sal, 1985. I don't know what he is today. But I think, just following what Jani has said, maybe the time has come to
this important question of what's to be done. We are in a difficult international situation, end of empire. The problem with the end of empire shows, yes, paper tiger, but it also shows imperialism has a huge capacity to do harm. Since American imperialism and their allies have massacred 45 million people in different wars around the world. 45 million people. We grew up in a generation where the whole world was taught to hate with a passion genocide against Jews. And today we live in a world where people talk of the Jewish state will not do genocide the way the fascists did it in Germany. That's hide in camps and massacre. They want to do it now on live television, and they've been doing it on live television. Over 2 years in Gaza, we see that every day. So the level of impact has been extremely huge. It's been devastating. And the dangers are extremely high, but the encouragement would always be that we now know this paper tiger can be fought successfully, but you need to strategize, you need to develop an approach that will be effective. And once you take that approach, you can succeed. Has refused to come to the stage. So are you to speak from, sorry? Okay, so you have only 5 minutes each. I used to know when we were scholars in Codes. World. So good to see you, Hakim.
Really my pleasure to see you too, and I'm quite happy that you are as critically looking to the global picture in a very critical manner. That's what we were doing before, and that's what we continue doing without the, how do you call it, some of the past conviction. But no, more seriously, I think what your introduction and Mr. Jani and our chair, Kumba, are quite relevant and gave me, in fact, the really an excellent introduction on what I'm going to say. And this is really the impact on Africa of the global fragmentation and the crisis, the global crisis we are all of us expecting after this conflict. And this is, of course, is an important shock for the economy, and the impact of the shock will be not only on Africa, but almost on developed world, on the developed world, but basically, I think, on developing economies. We were in this morning discussing the issue of debt in Africa and the challenges some African countries are facing, and almost, in fact, something following the World Bank report is 38 countries are going through debt stress in the continent out of 55. And I think this is really an important challenge. What we are saying and what we are is that this crisis is going to harm, in fact, the continent. Basically, from some work I did at least, what I'm seeing as a result of an impact. In fact, the countries who are going through difficulties before, these difficulties are going to be accelerated. And I think the continent was going for the last couple of years through some challenges macroeconomic challenges, failure in structural transformation, industry, agriculture, and this global crisis and this war is going to have a very strong impact on the continent, is going to accelerate probably the debt crisis, is going to accelerate the economic stagnation of almost all African economies. And I think this needs really a strong response and a very innovative and audacious response from the top, in the design of the economic policy, but I think also from the civil society and particularly, in fact, the social movement. And I think the most important objective of this meeting is to discuss the excellent report prepared by Trust Africa on the social movement. And I think they have also a role to play in putting pressure in designing innovative responses, in designing, in supporting, in fact, the civil society in trying to develop new ideas. So I think it's time for innovation for the continent, it's time for new experimentation, and it's time, in fact, for developing new ways and new paths, in fact, to respond to this global crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll now come to the panel on the stage. No, that's right. You just introduce yourself and tell us what's to be done in 5 minutes.
Thank you. So my name is Marwa El Daily. I come from Egypt. I'm a very proud member of Africa. And I teach at the University in Cairo. I chair a foundation in Egypt. So I'm wearing a hat of a professor and a civil servant and sometimes also engaged because I'm also advisor to the Minister of the so a lot of government, society. Coming from Egypt actually is enough in this discussion. Can you hear me? Because I'm editing myself. So let me just start because it's really even before coming here, I was thinking, gosh, if this escalates, maybe some friendly or unfriendly bombs would destroy the airport in Egypt and I can't go back. It even crossed my mind that I might not be able to go back to my country. Like, so this is the kind of world we're living in now. Insecurity, and when I knew that I'm going to be on the panel today, I was thinking, where should I start? And I thought of starting with a story that just happened in the last Eid. It was during the last Eid prayer in Egypt that I found very interesting. There was a president, there was the Sheikh of Azhar, like the highest religious authority. And by the way, what I'm saying now has nothing to do with religion, nor does it have to do with the fact that the hero of this story carries the name of Fatma, which is the name of my mom, with my mother. So I warn you. But then he started with the Sheikh in the Eid prayer, live on TV to the world. He started with بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر الكامن فيها, which means the Sheikh was starting by the name of Fatma. And Fatma, for those who don't know, she is the daughter of the Prophet, and the name of Fatma, and her father, so the Prophet, and her husband, which is Ali ibn Abi Talib, and her sons, which is Hassan and Hussein. And the secret that lies in Fatma. And everybody in Egypt was, what? This is the Shi'i oath. It's not Sunni, and we are a Sunni country, and of course Shi'i country is Iran. And so everybody was so destabilized, the Gulf countries were destabilized. How come Egypt speaks something that represents Iran? And when people started thinking about it, it's what is this secret that unites Fatma? Because it's her father and it's her son and it's her husband. And actually, for so long, we were taught to believe that we have problems with Iran based on religion, while when you come to think about it, it was her husband and her father and her. There was no problem. And then when Egyptians started asking why are we against Iran in general for so long, or why we have problems, we realized that there is no problem, there is no fundamental issue between Shiism and Sunnis. And in 1 second, people started united. So this secret in Fatma was actually, the word was unite. There is no differences. And I believe the solution out of this is unity, because unity is power. And the differences sometimes are illusions. They do not exist. They exist because of imperialism to survive, colonialism to survive. It cannot survive without creating these differences between us. And for the first time, I believe that we are taking more stance, at least in my country now, that we are trying to unify ourselves with other countries, and unify and name things as they are. Because what is happening is really destabilizing a world order. It might have been good, but I don't think it was good enough. So maybe it is a chance, because this world order, the values of it was starting to crack, and we didn't say anything about. Now it's time to unite, and we have to stand up for what we believe is right, for the values that we believe in. And especially when I'm talking about I'm talking about Africans. Me as an Egyptian, I also carry this Arab perspective as well. We have values. We are the civilization. I came to this world believing that we are underdeveloped, and I looked always to development as it comes from the West. Democracy, it comes from the West. Look at America, look at Europe, look at the Western countries, and all this is falling apart. And for the first time, we are seeing the crimes that are made in the name of these flashy words. And we are asking, even when I'm teaching now my students, when I'm teaching them even governance from what perspective? The Western perception of democracy, this is what sets the rules for governance. I'm sorry if I'm taking too long. The bottom line of this story to me is that what is going on in our region, it needs that we stop it by unity, by working together, and by raising our voice, by calling this a genocide, by calling this murders, and by forcing our government. Civil society has a role to really have a role with the government. If we have any of these leaders, listen to the ICG and put them in prison. Because I have to finish. So thank you.
Thank you. That was very inspirational, and I think the example you raised should induce us into very deep thoughts. Thank you very much. That's why, although you went beyond your time, I couldn't stop you because I was enjoying it. Can we, Dauda, you come last. Introduce yourself and...
Good afternoon. Oops. Does it work? Oh, it does. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bongile Mkabela. Mamtembu. I'm born in Mtembu. It's very important to my identity. And that I'm Mamtembu. You see, in the African culture, a woman never loses her name. She always carries it. She will be buried in the name she was born into. And therefore, you know, even though we are told that Africa is most patriarchal, a lot of the patriarchy actually comes from the West. Matriarchy is very important. And I say this to say the feminist ways of looking at the world today is going to be crucial. And in introducing myself, let me just also say I don't think it matters what I do. What on a day-to-day, what matters is what I want to push for. And it is institutions and the building of African institutions that are really anchored on African values. And that brings me to, things that we are saying. Chair, when you opened, you talked about your story with Ebrima. And when he was a Marxist. And those stories remain very important. And what remains important, we might lose the language of imperialism and so on, but we cannot lose the capacity to organize and organize ourselves. And also we must accept that many of us have been co-opted so long ago that we don't even know we're co-opted. We know we are co-opted when we must speak to our people, to ourselves, and we need so many communications people to mediate our language and the language of the people we claim to lead. That really tells you the level of disconnect between the intellectual, African intellectual, and African day-to-day experience and life. I also speak, and probably it will show, my age will show, that I speak as part of the generation that rose up in South Africa in 1976. Got imprisoned for it and all of it. Why I raise that is building of movements, because that protest was not just a localized protest. That movement was a movement that became worldwide known. Young people, 17, 16-year-olds. The ability of the people at that time to organize young people, not to organize them for projects, which is what we seemingly are comfortable with, is to organize young people for entrepreneurship, organize young people to do, we almost, swapping young people for machines. We need them to get trained for the market. They must be relevant for the market. What we're not doing enough is training our young people to think critically. And yet, we continuously want to say they are our future. They cannot be our future if we cannot dream together. But at the same time, as a generation that's gone by, is looking at going out, we have a different responsibility. We call ourselves elders now. As elders, we have to play the role of elders and show eldership and allow young people to lead. And I always say my greatest advantage, Chair, is that nobody ever called me a young person. And that's why I could engage in matters that were about state, were about life as an African person, were about my people as an African, where I belonged. We've locked young people in forums of young people, refusing them an opportunity to engage in broader matters and issues. What do I think needs to happen is your question, Chair. This is what I think needs to happen. We need to move away from conversations that are narrow and that are defined by the past. Colonization. I mean, how many times do you hear decolonize? I'm like, the very expression of decolonize is expressed in a colonized way. Because colonization is in our soil, is in our water, is everywhere. So if we allow it to continue framing conversations, we deprive ourselves an opportunity to think completely outside the boxes that exist and think the Africa we want 50 years from today. Not the Africa we want next 10 years. We need long-term planning. And the processes that have been given to us that are called democracy, of course, they ensure that you plan only for the next 5 years, knowing that you'll achieve very little in the next 5 years if you set up, and I'm not talking about extension of terms of the political elite, I'm not talking about that. Just talking about long-term planning. So whoever comes into office inherits a plan that's owned by the people, and when you say the people, you mean those at the marketplace can defend it and know it. It's not only the one that's expressed by the intellectuals in boardrooms. And That plan is the kind of thing that China used to be where it is. If we can believe that Africa is in our hands, and if we plan for the next 10 years, we're planning for ourselves. Our role and responsibility is to plan for generations to come, which means we need to set it up today and set it up such that it's beyond capture yet by the West again. We have to strengthen regional solidarities. We survived in those years because there were regional and intergenerational forums that did not lock young people, old people, children in different spaces. We need to foster a sense of belonging to all Africans. I'm South African. I'm embarrassed every time South Africans are fighting other Africans. Yet I don't blame the man in the street. I know the politicians have used the boundaries and the borders as a way of control and have used people as weapons to defend their own policies. They're not defending their interests. They're defending the policies and they're defending the positions that politicians would have taken. We need to know how to share our stories such that our children are inspired by who we are and can see themselves beyond today. I know, Chair, I've gone a little bit longer. I'm going to tie it down. I'm going to just tie it up by saying there are things we understood then that should be understood today, and that power concedes nothing without demand. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's extremely important, and this idea of planning for the future, I think, is profound. Dauda, introduce yourself in 5 minutes.
My name is Dauda Garuba. I'm the director of the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD, West Africa. The chair actually started the panel moderation by talking about the end of empires. And what I told myself was that the end of empire is not necessarily the end of history, because as a student of history, there have always been the rise and fall of empires. And drawing from what is happening in the Middle East today, I've told myself, even if we were to end that war today, it is obvious that things will never be the same again in that region. There is also issue speaking to the balance of power in that region, to all the equation of powers, as you want to adjudge it. But in the last few years, things have happened globally that had to tell on the place of Africa. And these two key wars have been the war in Ukraine and the war in Iran today. If you were to look at the war in Ukraine, 3 countries in Africa are today being pointed as having been affected or getting involved in a proxy war, if you want to say. Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya have openly been announced as having forces on the ground that are being captured in one way or the other. In this ongoing crisis, or let me say, in that Ukraine crisis, we got to know that Ukraine was growing that much of the grains that the whole of the world were feeding on, including African countries with so much arable land. Then there is also the bit of the ongoing war in Iran. Reading the papers yesterday up to this moment, we are being told as a result of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the decline we've had in terms of what is bringing food to Africa, what is bringing uranium or fertilizers to Africa, urea and all other things, that including even iron and steel, as I even read as at yesterday and today. And the longer routes that people are now taking to take things off and into the country, the Cape of Good Hope, West South Africa. What is obvious in this is that which also I have told myself, that now that we now have countries in the Middle East who are now also raising their head, and when I say country, I'm talking of Iran particularly, and it seems to be justified in what they are doing, and people are also praising them that nobody ever thought they would be able to withstand the missiles up to this extent. It's obvious that Africa has sunk much deeper into being the underdog of the world moving on. And that actually deserves a response from Africa. I totally agree with the keynote point made that we need to go back to that trading within ourselves as a way out of the current challenge. But we also are appreciative of the fact that, appreciative in invited commas, that we have always been in a race to the bottom. Who is dangling what? And how we all fall over ourselves and being unable to collectivize our capacity to bargain on issues. For me, that is a key thing that I think, even in trying to trade it ourselves, or in trying to see carrots dangled over us to scatter our capacity to unite, we need to ask ourselves, where are those frameworks that is going to guide this trading with ourselves? Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is there that could act as a very good framework for this, but we never really succeeded with it. And as the point already underscored by the keynote giver, critical minerals are central to this. Before now, I thought the energy transition movement was going to make this whole fight over oil and the Strait of Hormuz a non-issue. But it's obvious now that the progress we thought we were making, that was being dangling globally, that energy transition is on, it's obvious that we need crude oil to survive as a global economy. So in that context, we need to go back and tell ourselves, be it oil or the critical mineral that are in question, Africa needs to decide on how to proceed in the midst of the current challenges. And never as before, that we need to sit down around the table and tell ourselves. We have the African, mining code. It's also an opportunity to sit back and ask ourselves, how do we implement this in the way that is going to deliver the required benefit for Africa? So this fight in the Middle East is a lot of blessings in disguise, but knowing fully well that, like I said, Africa is going to be the underdog, we have all the instruments that had been on board long before now, like the mining code I talked about, like the opportunity thrown around by the AFTA. We need to take on these two instruments and sit around and ask ourselves, how do we move forward with the leveraging the ongoing challenges? I am not going to be surprised tomorrow because, like I saw this morning and yesterday, Trump talked about the fake news that was associated coming from Nigeria and the CNN. And people were already afraid that, oh, even in the midst of ceasefire that is going on, would Nigeria be the next country? Looking at the way the countries are being taken on, and there's one common thing that they all share, which is oil. Venezuela, Iran, Nigeria. And these are key issues, I think, rather than just, we need to have deeper we need to think deeper than this, and also ask ourselves on how to engage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. I think the key issues that have been articulated is that, yes, imperialism is a paper tiger, it is collapsing, but it is extremely dangerous and destructive at its point of collapse. And that therefore, we have a collective responsibility to mobilize, to organize, to engage, to make sure that the damage it does is limited, its actions get mitigated, and that we're able to move towards that El Dorado of controlling our own resources for ourselves. This is extremely important. I think the second key point that Abdullah Jani made is who speaks for truth and justice today? The organizations are not doing that. The UN, he points out, is not able to do that anymore. The African Union, ECOWAS, and the other regional bodies, they are not. Therefore, we really need to engage in that process of creating new voices that could articulate the imperatives of our time, that will challenge the harm being done, and that will above all mobilize the people to resist the directions that we are moving towards at this time. I think thirdly, and Dauda was quite clear on that, is that all these are about our resources. And that when the entire world is mobilizing to take our resources, and the fight is between those who have been stealing our resources in the past and the new ones who are now beginning to steal our resources and who want to continue along that path, the real challenge is to articulate a strategy where we as Africans can take that challenge of ensuring our resources are guarded for our own use and for our own development. In all this, I think we need to reflect a bit on the way in which our own national leaderships are being divided into groups of those who are lackeys of imperialism and therefore are ready to continue to play that dangerous game that's against our interest, and those who are still able to speak with a firm voice defending the African position. And I think South Africa has clearly shown itself to be a leader in that regard. It has been bold, it has been decisive, it has been able to show it has no fear of bullies, and the ultimate message of the South African president is the people of Africa, arise, you can deal with these bloody bullies. Now we'll move into why we all came here, which is to discuss how Trust Africa's own study and analysis of social movements will be a point of entry that will galvanize us into this new age. Bamba, over to you.
One, two, 1, 2. It's not happening. 1, 2. Microphone, mic check. No, we need a different mic. 1, 2. Let's try 1, 2. 1, Tech support, tech support. Okay. No. 1, 2. Okay. I think we're okay. We can go with this now. All right. Otherwise, I'm going to abandon the microphones and just shout 1, 2. But we've got people on online. Okay. All right. Please, may we give tidbits that he shared, I think it's going to be a bestseller. A big hand to Prof. Chibo, to our keynote speaker, to Madam Kumba, and to the panelists for all the insights that you shared, Dauda, Marwa, and Sisbongi. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Briggs Bomba. I serve as the Director of Programs at Trust Africa. And first is to thank you all for joining us here in Abuja. You will have heard already that it's the occasion of the 41st board meeting of Trust Africa. And it's a pleasure to be welcoming everyone to the launch of a seminal report that Trust Africa is releasing today, which is titled Power Building in Africa, Constituents-Based Organizing, Resourcing, and Resistance. This is a study that is co-authored by Nicolette Naylor and Halima Mohammed. They are both online, and we'll be hearing their voices very soon. For those who have traveled with us over the years, you know that this report is not a once-off publication for Trust Africa. It is the latest chapter in our long-standing commitment to strengthening African-led social movements. From the very first African Social Movements Baraza that happened in Harare in 2018, to the second African Social Movements Baraza in Johannesburg in 2022, to a social movements and funders convening that we did in Dakar in 2023, and most recently to the African Social Movements Baraza that we held in Accra in 2025. We have sought to consistently create spaces where movement leaders, infrastructure organizations, and funders can reflect honestly about power, about agency, and about resourcing. So the study that we are releasing today was commissioned directly out of these conversations because we kept hearing the same urgent question. How do we move from talking about transformative resourcing of movements to actually doing it? So Nicolette and Halima spent months listening deeply to movement leaders, to funders, to ecosystem actors across the continent who were speaking in the context that we have had, a time at which civic space is shrinking, geopolitical shifts are reshaping development financing on the continent, and the old funding models are visibly cracking. The report does not offer any easy answers. Instead, it gives a clear-eyed analysis of the trends, the ideological tensions, the gaps, and most importantly, the concrete possibilities for change in this moment. It reminds us that constituents-based organizing is not only something we should look at as a niche, but it is the very ground on which African agents is built. So we want to sincerely thank the authors for their rigor, their honesty, and the deep solidarity with the movements that they showed up in writing this work. We also want to acknowledge the general support and intellectual partnership of the Wallace Global Fund, our dear sister Ellen Dorsey, the Ford Foundation, Lusako, and Vuyiswa, and others within Ford Foundation, Hewlett Foundation, our dear sister Diakumba, without whom this work would not have been possible. So we want to transition to hear from Nicolette and Halima, who will share the key findings and reflections from the study. And after their sharing, we are going to hear from two colleagues, Thierry, my colleague at Trust Africa. Please give Thierry a big hand as he already comes forward. Come forward, Thierry. Come forward. You'll be one of our discussants. And I would also want to invite up on stage our board member, Anna Matsika. Please give her a big hand as she steps forward. And after their sharing, we are going to open up for just a few reflections from the House in terms of what we've heard from the beginning and what we are going to hear as this report is launched. I'm delighted to invite you, Nicolette and Halima, to share with us. And Halima, I've had 2 calls with her today, and she's insisted that the contract is that they have 20 minutes to present their report. We mistreated them last time when they did a preliminary report and cut their time short. So today I promised that we've got 20 minutes for this. Over to you, Halima. I've started my timer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Briggs, and thank you for having us here. And thank you to the support from Trust Africa to publish the study, Power Building in Africa. We are in a moment of multiple overlapping global crises, as we just heard in the opening session. Wars, economic shocks, impunity in violations of international laws, a breakdown in multilateralism, and a severe funding crisis. We're also in a moment of deep reconfiguration of power. And like Marwa has referenced, this reconfiguration is not necessarily a bad thing in terms of a global system that is thoroughly broken and has not always served Africa. So in this moment, the question that often gets asked is, what does this mean for Africa? But our publication is asking a slightly different question. What does this moment mean for how people in Africa are organizing power and resourcing power building? So we want to ground the discussion around our report with a quote by Arundhati Roy. What we need is a new kind of politics, not the politics of governance, but the politics of resistance, the politics of joining hands across the world and preventing certain destruction. And I'm going to just talk now a little bit about what the study is about and what it's not. The study comes out, as Briggs said, it comes out of ongoing Trust Africa-led conversations, including the Baraza processes. We were asked to explore the context related to organizing and organizing infrastructure in Africa and the state of support for organizing in Africa. And we also offer insights that seek to advance critical thinking around more transformative resourcing for constituency-based organizing. Where we started the study is not where we ended. And even now, the context is shifting at an alarming rate. So what we're sharing in this publication is really what are the patterns, what are the contradictions, and what are the questions that we cannot avoid anymore. We detail the methodology in the publication that we use to inform the work. We spoke to 23 people across movements, philanthropy, and support organizations. And so we have to emphasize that this is not a representative sample, it's a snapshot, and it's a snapshot of a moment that's constantly evolving. We're going to talk today, and we're going to play tag team, Halima and I. We're going to talk today on just some of the emerging reflections, and we're really encouraging people to read and engage with the report. And before we go into the substance, I just want to note that language matters, especially since we still see northern frameworks and narratives being imposed, which are effectively limiting the agency of our civic spaces. We use the language of constituency organizing in the report. And that's referring to people-led, collective organizing spaces. And this includes social movements, but it's not restricted to social movements. It's much wider. We do use movements as a lens and an entry point to talk about what we are seeing. And we use philanthropy to mean all types of philanthropy, institutionalized and organic philanthropy and African philanthropy. And we use a very wide definition of resourcing beyond money. So this publication is not coming up with answers. It's a set of reflections, tensions, provocations that emerged from conversations. It's a moment of listening back to what is already happening, and it's an invitation to those reading the report to think together. I'm going to hand to Alima now to talk a bit about the context and core tensions.
Thank you, Nicolette, and thank you to Trust Africa. It really is a privilege to have been able to engage in this work. And Briggs, thank you for confirming that we have our time. So despite the grave context and the contraction of external resourcing, what we found is that organizing is not declining. Instead, it's evolving in very dynamic and very powerful ways. We are seeing youth-led organizing. We're seeing intertwining of digital and physical organizing. Organizing that's happening in fluid, non-institutional spaces and that's weaving through the institutions and non-institutionalized spaces. We're seeing significantly more intersectional struggles and transnational solidarity, significant internal and alternative resourcing, and very diverse and distributed leadership models. And often, these spaces and how they operate are invisible to formal systems and deliberately invisibilized by a system that does not recognize what is in that mold, what is in their mold. So already there's a disconnect. We have systems, funding systems, institutional systems that are designed for one kind of organizing, but the reality on the ground is something very, very different. We heard earlier about the need for new voices. We say that those voices are there. They're just marginalized and silenced in that challenge to power and privilege. So this core tension about power and funding is one of the clearest findings in the study. There's a chronic underfunding of political power building in Africa, but at the same time, organizing continues. And so the question becomes, what exactly is being funded and to what end? We know too well the problems with most funding to social movements. Pressure to institutionalize and depoliticize, condescension around money automatically destroying movements, a severe inability to meet movements where they are, both substantively and procedurally. And we need to add this the long list of NGOs' critiques of funding, and then amplify these for social movements. These persist despite all of the performative language of philanthropic solidarity that we've been hearing about, especially over the last few years. Additionally, with movements, funding is often directed at moments of visibility or perceived impact. So, when a movement peaks, when there's a protest, when something trends, but what it's not directed at is the long-term work of building power. So we end up with this contradiction. Philanthropy says, yes, we want transformation, but what is being funded are outputs, not power. This links to Bongi's point on organizing for projects rather than organizing for critical thinking, organizing for resistance. And this way of funding too is not new. But what is new is that the dynamic changes in context and the demands from those at the front lines of change are making this contradiction impossible to ignore. We want to use, in our study, we use some case studies, state studies to bring these issues to life. And we want to use a very real example reflecting the politics of the work and the attempts at depoliticization by looking at the question of Palestine and what this has meant for civic organizing, including in Africa. What we have seen globally is a massive outpouring of solidarity in support of Palestinian liberation and anti-genocide action, together with a massive clampdown on civic space actions and words. Almost 10% of global civic space violations in 2024 were linked to Palestinian solidarity. We have no doubt this has increased. In 2025, one estimate showed at least $12 to $14 million in funding cuts counted, with estimations that reality is far higher. Now, organizations and movements in Africa have not escaped this. And while those advocating in solidarity with Palestine have risked much, the sector and the philanthropy supporting it has been largely complicit, overtly and covertly. And this has exposed something very, very important. The extent to which external funding can seek to shape what is politically possible. This has exposed how funding can seek to limit political agency. We often hear about the refrain of the revolution not being funded, but we don't enough about it being actively defunded, especially by what are meant to be progressive forces. Organizations and movements have had to choose, speak out and risk losing external funding, or remain silent and remain resourced. And that's not a neutral choice. That's a political constraint, one that preserves the status quo, that romanticizes and instrumentalizes organizing and action, as long as it stays depoliticized. There's a strong sense that the imposition of movements as apolitical actors as a framework for resourcing needs serious challenging, that movements could and should, if their constituencies demand, include an element of political power, and that philanthropy must interrogate this imposed limitation. It also shows the importance of internal resourcing. Many mobilizations in different parts of the continent are able to continue because they are self or internally and locally resourced. And this internal resourcing is consistently ignored, marginalized, treated as inconsequential. Yet what we are hearing is that this resourcing is the backbone, not the add-on. It's philanthropy that's the add-on. So any campaign for external resourcing of power building must understand these internal resourcing streams and understand them not as transactional elements, but as a foundation of solidarity. Nicolette, over to you in the next case study.
And this, thanks Halima, this can be contrasted with another case study we looked at around Gift of the Givers. And Gift of the Givers is one of the most powerful examples on the continent of independent, locally rooted resourcing. It's developed the largest disaster response agency of African origin and has distributed over $300 million in aid across 47 countries over 32 years. They are able to respond rapidly to Palestine, to disasters across Africa and globally, because their model is built on community trust and local giving. It doesn't buy into grants and donor proposal writing. It's resourced through donations and partnerships. You click on a button and donate to Gift of the Givers. This gives them flexibility and political independence and a clear political positioning. And the key point here is not to romanticize, but to recognize that when resources are locally grounded and responsive, they can be more flexible, they can be less restricted, and they can be more autonomous and independent. And that means it can be more aligned to the politics of the moment. So agency is directly linked to how you're being resourced. That's one of the findings that we saw. And we also examined another case study around Kenya and the uprisings around the financial bill, which similarly showed us that political agency is directly linked to how resourcing happens, and that when resourcing happens at a local level, through local giving, it's with no strings attached, and it gives a large amount of political agency to the movements that receive that kind of money. I want to turn now to the insights and learnings to help move ahead. And one of the first ones is around radically reframing resourcing. What may be the most important shift in the study is that we were told very clearly, do not start with money. Start with the politics, the purpose, the constituency, and solidarity. Because when resourcing is separated from organizing, resourcing shouldn't be separated from organizing. It's part of constituency building in itself. And when we look at Africa, we see that resources already exist in the form of individual giving. The EPIC Africa study found that individual giving is a significant source of funding for civil society. 65% of organizations receive support from individuals, from individual giving. We have community giving. We have diaspora flows, and the role and potential of diaspora giving has been much neglected on the continent. We have internal movement resourcing, which Halima's already referenced. Why are we not counting these forms of resourcing as real funding? We know that Remit Scope notes that remittance flows into Africa in 2023 was at $90.2 million, accounting for 5.2% of Africa's total GDP. But Western frameworks tell us that remittances are just interfamily transfers. But we know that the reality is much more nuanced and linked to community giving and filtering across communities beyond interfamily transfers. And I think that what we found here is that we all need to interrogate our own assumptions, because we operate with a Western narrative that power comes from big money and from large institutional donors based in the North. We don't recognize that power can come from many people giving small amounts of money horizontally on the continent. Often we also speak about African philanthropy as high net worth individuals on the continent and ignore the many people giving small amounts horizontally, community to community, as a form of giving and as a form of philanthropy. So we need to also interrogate the assumption that Africans don't give, when in fact the data shows us that Africans do give all the time. We are all giving all the time, but it's to institutions and communities that Africans trust, like the diaspora, like local civic entities, the mosque, the church, or local development groups. And so the issue of trust and legitimacy is important. The question is not whether resources exist. It does exist. It's whether we're recognizing them as power. And the issue isn't one of scarcity, it's one of recognition. We also separated our insights, some further insights that surround reframing, resourcing, and African giving. But for social movements, what emerged strongly is the need to protect and prioritize political agency, to build from constituencies outward, and to invest in internal and community resourcing as a function of constituency building. There's a need for social movements to be willing to say no to restrictive funding and to position this more collectively across movements on the continent, and a strong call that we demand alternative funding models, substantive movement funds, endowments, and philanthropic reparations. Importantly, movements are asking for support that enables collective reflection and strategizing, knowledge building and exchange across the continent, and investment in deeper leadership infrastructure, collective care, security, protection, communication, messaging and amplification, and most importantly, solidarity building. Because power is built in the spaces of interweaving, not just in moments of action. We were told clearly that any collective or Pan-African efforts to support movements or movement resourcing campaigns must be movement-led. Funders can't be doing this on their own without movements at the center. Halima's going to share some of the insights from our report for philanthropy.
Thanks, Nicolette. What's becoming increasingly clear is that for philanthropy, this is a moment of reckoning. It requires that philanthropy understands the broader frame of organizing, not just the role social movements play, but what comes before, after, what sits elsewhere in the constituency-led civic spaces is just as important. It's important that philanthropy understands where movements are, rather than romanticizing what they think movements should be. And again, the narrative here of what movements look like is really important. So philanthropy needs to allow space for differentiation. Not all movements are meant to be lifelong. Neither are all movements simply protest movements. There's a call that support must recognize and align with the political agency of those at the front lines. Fund politics, not projects. Fund resistance. Fund critical thinking. It asks that philanthropy be willing to engage risk differently and move from a transactional basis to true solidarity-based support. That philanthropy aligns practice with rhetoric. What is needed is not just any resourcing, but truly transformative resourcing. The support is provided for movements and movement infrastructure. Both are important. It's a false dichotomy to choose, and that they don't default to creating new gatekeepers, but need to invest in better understanding the existing support systems and how to build on these. And fundamentally, that philanthropy let go of control, because you cannot fund power while trying to contain it. When it comes to intermediaries and African foundations, regranters, we know that philanthropy struggles to support that which is not in a form it is comfortable with. And so intermediaries then become a critical gateway. But importantly, they are also sites of tension. What we heard is that often they pass on donor restrictions, they replicate northern funding practices, They hold power without always interrogating it. There's even a term that came up in our conversations. It's called delegated conditionality, where the constraints don't disappear, they simply transfer downwards. And so the question is not whether intermediaries should exist, but how they exercise power, how they absorb or redistribute risk, how accountable they are to movements, and importantly, how they co-create and align in solidarity without displacing agency. Insights that emerge for intermediaries center around interrogating their own power and positionality. If you sit on resources, you sit in power. The question is, what will you do with it? That they absorb and don't pass on the conditionalities. That they examine their structures and practices. Are they modeling the global north? Are they in service, or are they in service of their constituencies? That they ensure accountability downwards to movements, not just to donors. And that they act as bridges, not gatekeepers. We're very much in this report that we would love to expand further on, but we want to also engage in a conversation. So I'm going to hand over to Nicolette to close for now.
So to close, this moment demands that we radically reimagine transformative resourcing from the ground up. Philanthropy has to center the voices and the leadership of movements themselves in any strategizing and conversations. We must radically reimagine how we think about resourcing from within the African continent and see these resources as potential game changers and catalytic resourcing. Resourcing must be a tool for building solidarity and for true political agency. We must center African resources, reconsider alternative types of resourcing, reserves, endowments, reparations as a reflection of solidarity. And we have to focus on the autonomy and independence of resourcing to allow us to engage with the politics of the work. We have to move from requests for core funding and flexible funding to autonomous and independent funding. We must invest in long-term power building, and we must enable collective spaces for solidarity, reflection, and strategizing that's led by and for movements. And finally, we have to be willing to ask difficult questions about power, about money, and about politics. Africa is not waiting in this moment of crisis. Africa is organizing. The question is, will we resource that power or constrain it? We hope you will engage with our report and share your feedback with all of us. Thank you, Briggs.
Wow. A very big end to very capable colleagues up here who are already going to do the courageous act of beginning to chew and digest this launch is not the conclusion of a process. It's actually the beginning at resourcing and movements. It's not about more money. It's about transformative resourcing. Transformative resourcing builds political power. So a lot for us to chew on and digest. But at this stage, I would like to invite our discussants to help us in starting to just share your reflections on what you are hearing and on the report that we are launching today. Over to you, Thierry.
Thank you, Rex. Good afternoon. My name is Son. I read the study. I try to elaborate some policy, some insightful report, insightful document around the study. I think it's I found it is the meaningful conversation. It's an important step in a longer journey. It's just a step we need to do in order to achieve this journey. So I will not go back to the state of the. After the reading, I try to connect the dots. Is what one thing I learned from Mr. Jane a year ago and other mentor. I tried to connect the dot, and I realized that what we see here is not unique. We see the same pattern in many other ecosystems. I see it in young people in politics. I see it in women in politics, into the decentralization processes and culture. The traditional authority have the same issue. Even in our one of our global discussion about the decolonization of knowledge, we have the same challenges, with similar challenges. We have people with deep experience and other with deep experience and other with strong energy and willingness to act. We need to connect them. Definitively, we need to connect them. We have a rich treasure of knowledge. I come at Trust Africa 6 months before, and I found 20 years of knowledge, and we need to highlight that. We need to connect the dots. We have strong organization and institution, and yet, 20 years after, I remain with one recurring question. I know that implementing public policy is a long process. I also know that many enablers are already identified: philanthropy, dialogue, coalition, opportunities into concrete, workable action for effective governance, democracy, and development for people and for territory. In other words, how do we truly connect the dots and turn our expected outcomes into real outcomes for people and territory? So thanks for this step, for bringing us closer to an answer, and hopefully, and I hope, an answer that we can start testing together right after this conference. Thank you. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much. A big hand for Thierry, not just for the reflections, but also for anchoring us in the intensive journey to get us to the publication of the report. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, but also for really driving us to get to a point where we are, gladly launching the report today. At this stage, I would like to invite Anna to share your own reflections on what you had, Nicolette, Halima, but also from what you saw in the report. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Briggs and Thierry, for the reflections. And thank you so much, Nicolette and Halima, for such an important study, and broadly to the Trust Africa executive for stewarding such an important product and creating this platform to reflect broadly. So as I was listening to Halima and Nicolette, I just wrote a couple of notes as part of my reflections, but I'm happy that, Nicolette, you mentioned that there are no easy answers in this report, and even as I went through the report, I came out with a lot of reflection points, which I'm hoping, as we deliberate, possibly we will start co-creating, to focus on just three key things. The first one being that real change in Africa. Real change in Africa does not begin in institutions. But really, as Vonye mentioned, around even the 1976 movements, it begins with ordinary people in communities, simple people under trees, and it begins when citizens just find their voice, or when young people refuse to accept injustice as normal. But as Nicolette mentions, one of the barriers is we come when we want to finance the same community organizing and building. We bring in the complicated structures. We bring in the complicated templates that distorts the structure and the character of these movements, and also. This report matters because it tells us the truth about this moment, as you rightfully reflected, Briggs, in your remarks. Across the continent, civic space is under pressure, repression is rising, and economic pain is deepening. And yet, even in this moment, organizing is alive. It's alive in the public spaces, it's alive online in our communities, but also it's alive in the courage of young people. And it's alive in new forms of activism that are creative, connected, and deeply rooted in the lived realities. And I was happy with the case studies that Halima and Nicolette put into the report, because it shows the different forms, the new faces of activism, both from young people and older people, as it were. But also, secondly, the report tells us something important. It also says, like you said, Briggs, money is not the starting point, but solidarity is the starting point. Purpose is the starting point. And the political and moral case for why this work matters must come first before we even start talking about how much money is there. And that, for me, is a very, very powerful lesson, because when support begins with money, I think different speakers have mentioned this, when it begins with money, it can become very transactional, it can become very cautious, but also it becomes very controlling. But when support begins with solidarity, as mentioned earlier, it becomes something very different. It becomes trust, it becomes partnership, and it becomes a shared struggle. So we need to support activism, youth-led or otherwise, in ways that respects its character. As Nicolette mentioned, supporting with flexible resources, support with digital security, and even spaces like these, just to reflect, to heal, to learn and connect across borders on platforms such as this. So, in conclusion, I hope we do not just let this report become just another publication, or that this space becomes just another conversation platform, but let it become a challenge to each and every one of us representing an institution, but also even in your individual capacity, but also a challenge to funders to trust more, the nature and the character of our social movements, a challenge to institutions to listen more, to adapt. I think it's one of the keywords that Halima and Nicolette mentioned in the report, the issue of adaptability, but also a challenge to all of us to stand closer to the people who are already doing the hard work of building power from below. And I think if we do that, then the future will not be something that happens to us, but it will be what we as Africans build together. Thank you, Briggs.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. And so there's so many rich nuggets that the discussants have put on the table. And Halima and Nicolette, what's in the report and what you have shared. And it seems the question that we're exploring is a question of how change happens. How does change happen? And Prof. Jibo said in the 80s, they said through Maoism, or they said through Marxism, or through, there's a way that we would capture and, it and present these frameworks. And here we are also hearing a different language speaking to building this kind of power, building power that starts from below, that is constituents-based, building around organizing. Would like to invite your reflections. I think we heard all the way from the keynote speech that it's a pivotal moment. There's so many things that we are seeing, and the question imposes itself on how does change happen. But what I also like from our, from the discussants and the presentation from Halima and Nicolette is that there are some very concrete observations that they've put on the table. If I'm to take just one example, the issue of intermediaries and how you frame it as when speaking to movement leaders, the language of delegated conditionality came about, which is a huge indictment. We talk of African philanthropy, but if you are simply a center or a site of delegated conditionality from the global north to here, then we are not going to see the. Starting from there, then I'll come to you. Yeah. Just some brief reflections. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening.
Introduce yourself, please.
Oh, thank you. My name is Jide Ojo. I'm a writer, analyst, and development consultant from Nigeria. I want to appreciate Trust Africa for the invite and for the good work we've been doing. Recently, when I was writing on the so-called Christian genocide in Nigeria, I came across a video that was done by Trust Africa that was trying to debunk that and stating that the interest of U.S. in Africa said earlier when he said 38 African countries are in debt trap, sort of. And what Dauda Garuba said about the global economy, the resource, and the so-called that if there is energy transition, then there is no need for crude oil. Crude oil will be over in another decade and all of that. And everybody thought energy transition should put an end. But my key point is about accountability. Even when the author of this report spoke about philanthropy and that Africans do give, I cannot but agree with them that Africans do give, even though it may be small donations. And I reflected about what happened during COVID-19, and the entire world was shut down, and we survived. People were ready to give their little to support their neighbors to survive. But what did we hear after? Big scandals, money embezzled that cannot be accounted for. And that brings to question even the so-called debt crisis that most of African countries are. Last week I was involved in an analysis, and the question was about $88 billion that is leaving Africa as a result of corruption. 88 billion can do a lot to revamp our economy and make us less dependent on Western countries. So I think that question has not been, I don't know whether it's been answered in this report, but I agree with the issue of philanthropy, but accountability for resources that you even get, how are we ensuring that this money does not get into wrong purses? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must also join to commend.
Your name and yeah.
My name is Founding Executive Director of the African Center for Leadership, Strategy and Development. My intervention is responding to the of the learning question. What is to be done? First is that I think that we really need to understand the crisis. And Jibo referred to it about what Ebrima and others were doing in 1985. Because the crisis properly located is a transition from post-Cold War unipolar order. Let's understand that during the Ebrima time that was talked about, US will not just attack Iran. At that time, we were discussing about mutually assured destruction. And there was deterrence. But with the rise, with the recession, with the collapse of Soviet Union, and US emerging as a unipolar, because they did not actually become unipolar. And what we are seeing today is that with the emergence of other global powers, there is decomposition of the existing order. And I think that if you see many of the conversations, they don't go this deep to situate what is happening. And the leadership of the various countries don't also get all of this, especially in Africa where you have very little think tanks and where the political leader is also the thought leader. So I think that for Trust Africa and other organizations involved in this work, we need to be more nuanced and bring more understanding to the emergence of this crisis. Because unless we have that understanding, the solution will also elude us. The second point I want to make is the issue of organizing, not declining. And what do we do with that? Because we see that across Africa, there are traditional associations. There are community development associations. There are town unions. And increasingly, there are religious organizations. All of these groups, they are organizing. But what are they organizing on? That is the issue. So, one action point there is how to turn these organizations to look at issues that affect governance and development. And my final point is the question of resourcing and the fact that internal resources are marginalized, and the fact that, many of the resources are not recognized. Let me just share it with our own experience at the African Center for Leadership Strategy and Development Center, LSD. For the past 16 years, one of the most profound work that we have done is running a free leadership school. And we have graduated for 1 year. Somebody goes through the course for 1 year, and we have graduated over 3,000 students, but it's not donor funded. But people donated their time. All the lecturers that teach, we have over 60 lecturers across Nigeria. All the lecturers teach free of charge as a part of giving back to society. But in our account book from the leadership school, income is 0. So we need to look at all of those as part of resources and find ways of accounting for them. Once more, I want to thank Trust Africa for this. But like somebody said, this is the beginning. You still have more work to do.
Thank you very much for that. Let's move the microphone to this side, starting at the back. I see a hand at the back there. Yeah, you? Yeah, thank you. Introduce yourself quickly and your point.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Shalakwe Shonuga. First of all, kudos and well done to Trust Africa, CDD, and everybody that is involved with this project. I think we would all agree on the timeliness and the importance of this. I didn't come too early, and so my apologies for that. I didn't listen to the keynote address and a lot of the conversation, but I wanted to contribute to this because I work with two organizations. The first is called the Conference of Speakers and Presidents of African Legislatures, and it's a platform for legislative leaders, leaders of African parliaments across the continent. And it's called COSPAL, essentially. And what we do is that we facilitate collaboration, cooperation, and coordination amongst parliamentary leaders across the continent. And something that we are seeing increasingly is the importance of parliamentary diplomacy in our increasingly complex and global world. And when sometimes diplomatic channels fail, especially on the executive level, what we found is that sometimes the legislature does come in clutch and they use back channel approaches and soft power to be able to influence challenges on the legislative side, which then translates to the executive side and eventually to the whole of society approach. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned the potential solution that could be explored, because parliamentary diplomacy that we're seeing that is working more often than not. It has been seen in Ghana, in South Africa, in Nigeria, and in a lot of our own personal approaches as an organization. The second organization I work with is the Legislative Mentorship Initiative, which is an initiative that is raising, or that aims to raise the next generation of public sector leaders in Nigeria. And I love that Dr. Otivie mentioned leadership training. That's essentially what we do, but for young people. And I want to say that the demographic dividend is something that we must tap into. The young people across Africa and essentially across the world are a generation that is prepped and primed for action. And if we don't channel that action into positive, then there will be other channels that will ensure that action that is prepped and primed in young people is channeled to the negative. And so LMI is doing a lot of work, and I know that a lot of organizations are also doing a lot of work in terms of channeling the energies of young people. But that's also very important, because if we don't, essentially prep and prime their minds for the positive, they will be used as pawns and tools to ensure that the negative is being pushed, especially in terms of peace, security, and development across the continent, but also across the world. And something that we're trying to do in LMI this year is to take our training Pan-African. So LMI is partnering with COSPAL to ensure that we're partnering with legislative leaders to ensure that their youth population is also trained and doing a lot of good for their national parliaments, their nations, and also across the world. And then the last thing that I would say is to buttress on the points that somebody made in terms of knowledge management, research, and ensuring that what we're researching is for the benefit of all. There's so many research hubs, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent. A lot of think tanks, a lot of parliamentary research hubs across the continent. And so we're trying to start something called ArcNet, which is the African Resource and Knowledge Management Network, which is a network of knowledge management hubs across the continents that are working towards governance, development, and sustainability to ensure that there is a pipeline for parliamentary leadership and a knowledge and resource pipeline. So working with libraries, working with knowledge management centers. And I think that perhaps if you are a think tank or a knowledge management center within the nation or within the continent, I'd love to connect with you so that we can also add you to this resource. We're doing this in collaboration with the Otosua Institute in Berlin, and we've had our first workshop of sorts last 2 months ago, and we're working towards another one. So it'll be interesting to learn a little bit about what you're working on if you're a think tank or knowledge management center or working with a library, so that we can pull all these things together and they can actually be channeled towards parliamentary leaders across the continent. I'll pause here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd identified right next to you. Then we'll take 3 more here, and we transition.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Senator Yorubu. convener geopolitics series. I've listened to the conversation, and I try to take note. The direction is going. And there is something my big brother Otive said. Yes, there have been organizations, people have been organizing, but what are they organizing for? And there's something I want us to have, especially this opportunity. I studied international relations, and we did a lot of how Europe underdeveloped Africa, scramble and partition of Africa. And it seemed to be lost on us that there's another scramble and partition that is going on, but not in the way it happened in 1886. There is ongoing, as the new world order is emerging, there's a space of influence that is going on. And most times, Africa, we tend to look for new hero to try to align with, new hero to try to praise, and we leave our own issues. I know we tend to try to champion some issues across the globe, but have we tend to look inward? And that's what geopolitics, we look at global issue from African context. How do we, the massacre that is going on in Sudan, how often do we talk about it? The crisis in Ethiopia, in Tigray, where in the last 10 years, that's where we have the highest fatality, over 300,000, but it's hardly reported. What is going on in DRC? How do we champion it? So most time we seem to amplify the crises that are going across other areas. For those who have even the ability to fight for themselves, we seem to carry it on our head, but leave the issues in our continent, unattended. And there's something, my friend, he said, no, you talk about, because he talked about what is going in the Sahel, the new leadership. He said, no, I said, no, I'm pro-African. Let us not replace the Western imperialism with another imperialism, thinking that we are, and people, they use that opportunity to, use pseudo Pan-Africanism, but we are trying to replace another imperialism. We have to look inward. What is African focus? What is our own agenda? So this is an opportunity as the world is evolving. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, we take the last three hands. Yeah, the last three hands. Then we wrap up. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. My name is Olubide Olaniyan. I'm a development consultant and a poemist. My first issue is some few decades back, a man was named Cassius Clay by his parents. And after some time, he told everybody that his name is Muhammad Ali. We also had another person, Ransom Kuti fella, who told everybody that his name is Anikulapo. Fela Anikulapo. So the Africa of today in this global crisis, what you have in space is some persons look at Africa as a victim. Are we survivor of the crisis? Are we onlookers? Are we actors? So it's left for us to really name ourselves what we are in this crisis. That's my first intervention. The second very important point is also the issue of, a lot of times we talk about democracy, but we are neglecting the issue of power structure, even within Africa or beyond. And of course, humans are part of the primate. When you look at issue of biology, also very important before you adapt or maybe taking a part of a kind of a democracy that you are practicing. You have to have very clear understandings of this issue so that you are able to make a democracy that will work, that is adaptable, that is emerging from Africa. It's so important for us to also have that and to do that. Then very also important point that I also want to mention is the fact that for us to really be successful, the issue of rule of law is very paramount. A lot of times, of course, we want to do a lot of things, but even within us, we do not follow the rule. Therefore, we are not able to confront other people from outside on the need for them to also abide by the rule of law. And lastly, is also to mention that there's an African adage that says, if your neighbor is eating a very bad insect and you are not complaining, whenever he or she starts coughing, then you are not able to sleep. So we need to have a rethink about these issues.
I think right next to you, and yeah, briefly, then the last one.
My name is Abba Tahir. I'm a journalism teacher, provost of the Communication and Multimedia Training Academy here in Abuja. I want to talk about two things. One, we spoke about the challenge or the comatose status of the United Nations. There's no doubt about that. What do we do? Do we abdicate from the United Nations as a continent, or do we continue with it like that and continue to suffer? What is the status of the regional organizations in Africa? SADC, ECOWAS, African Union. Where are they? Where were they? And where are they headed? Are they also comatose? A few years ago, thank you. A few years ago, a fundamental strategic blunder happened before our very eyes. 3 key founding countries of the ECOWAS community left. What have you done about it? Where are they? Is this not a strategic security blunder? When are they going to come back? I read a very passionate letter from the founding leader of ECOWAS, General Yakubu Gowon, who is still alive. The civil war leader of Nigeria. He pleaded, as if he was shedding tears, that these countries must come back, that the African leaders of today, the West African leaders of today, should not allow them to go, whatever it will take. But where are they? What have we done? Who has caused their exit? Is it the Americans? Is it the Europeans? Is it the Middle Easterners, or who? The second point I want to talk about is most of the challenges or crises we face in Africa are caused by the lip service we have paid to education. From independence to present, 50, 60, 65 years or more, what have we done to the curricula of the education we profess in our institutions? For all these years, we have been training and producing job seekers. Job seekers to secure which jobs? This tool of technology has created thousands of jobs. But it has also, ironically, taken away millions of these jobs, creating thousands and taking away millions. That even those in jobs have their jobs threatened, talk less of those who are on queue in high schools, in universities, and other tertiary institutions, queuing up to graduate to come and work. Work in which jobs? Where are the jobs? What have we done to the curricula of institutions? Continually training and producing job seekers instead of job creators, with the mind frame, with the capacity, with the competence, with the skills to establish themselves, to create more jobs. Mr. Chairman is warning me. I want to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Just right next to you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Austin Agbe, West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network. It was Tajuddin who told us to organize and not agonize. Majority of times, we actually agonize. Where were we when Alpha Conde wanted a third term until the military regime struck? Where were we when Kampare wanted a third term until the first military regime, and today you have a Captain Ibrahim who has said, forget about democracy. Where are we? Election in few days in Benin, where there's literally opposition. Where are we? Lying on this soil in Nigeria. The conversation around democracy and African Trust mission is to strengthen the agency, advance justice and democracy. If we must organize I agree with the report that talked about solidarity. And I also want to quickly state, before I forget, I like to disagree with the example of what was this? The Gaza Strip, the Palestinian example. I would have thought of using all-grown examples. We've got what they call the End SARS movement in this country. Pure organization, local young people organization, without agonizing, that produced results, but had crackdown because of certain factors in democracy. I think if organizing must work, there has to be shared solidarity in a way, like I've always advised my colleagues as well, is that when there are issues in Nigeria and you think that Nigerian citizens can organize properly, you may be making a great mistake because they're going to pick them one by one. So, because we belong to this territory or continent in Africa, where were we when Tanzania did their election? Uganda. I mean, if we can't speak to these issues in a way of solidarity, Malawi, there are a number of them. And I think we should begin, if we must organize truly, we must organize around justice. It's actually the bane of insecurity in this country today. We must organize around equitable development. Man, I mean, I do agree with Professor Jibo, and of course, people that talk about America is interested in your resources. And I try to say, no, I don't. Sometimes I try to be at the middle end. If America is interested in our resources, so what are we doing with our resources today? If there's an issue in the Middle East, and they did a stroke, I raised an opinion. I said, you are not doing something now. Nigerian government, act now. They did not act. But personally, I acted. I went to store some fuel. I have no problem in the next 1 month. Nigerian government cannot store. I thank you. All right.
Thank you, colleagues. We are going to have, that's why I was requesting you, Hakim, to not leave us. We are going to have the official launching and closing remarks and vote of thanks happening. So before we do that, we want to invite you, Nicolette and Alima, to stay with us. But I also want to invite everyone from Trust Africa to step forward for a visual with copies of the report so that we can take a nice photo and we get the official launching happening and the closing remarks and vote of thanks from Ebrima. So please step forward and please step forward. Step forward, step forward. Yes, no, I need the chair of the programs committee in the photo. I also would like to invite you, Charmaine, Prof. Jibo, please step forward. Yeah, please step forward. Please step forward. All the speakers earlier, step forward. Step forward. Step forward, step forward. Anyone who has a report, come forward and join us. Ebrima, where do you want to do the visual? Okay, yeah, please. Yeah? Well, for tonight, you are. In solidarity. Please step forward. Anyone who has a copy of the report, step forward. Yeah, step forward, step forward. Madam Chair, okay. We need, yeah. Step forward. Aita, Janet, please, Janet, you are Trust Africa, step forward. Anyone who has a report, step forward. We want to have a very nice visual. Yeah, and we have our photo directors here. Fakumba, where is Fakumba? Oh, please, all go. Don't be shy, step forward. Oh. But Hakim, you stand on the side, please. 1 minute, yeah, please. Yeah, thank you, fantastic. Abda, please give Hakim a copy of the report. Yeah. We want, yeah, so let's, yeah, and also captures, the screen should still be on. We wanted our colleagues to be captured as well, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, please, can you try to turn the screen on? Yeah, we want them to show, it's still okay. Yeah, fantastic. We want them to show. So, yeah, thank you, that's beautiful now. Yeah, so we'll take the first one like this. Yeah. Another one that's a bit more active. We are going to 1985.
We should organize.
Okay, please. With our feet. Yeah, organize. Don't agonize. Organize. Agonize. Organize.
Don't agonize.
Yeah. So another one maybe report, lifting it up. Yeah, lifting it up. Copy of the report. Yeah. Africa. Maibuye. Africa.
Isoleto.
Yes. Amanda. Okay. Thank you. We can all take our seats. Thank you for coming to the stage. We can all take our seats. You were on fire. Yes. Thank you. Please take your seats. 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 Prof. Jibo, and Akim, may you take your seats. Madam Chair, may you take your seats. Please take your seats. At this moment, please take your seats. Please take your seats. All right, Ogo, Anna, can we please give a big round to the panel that just finished? Our discussants, Anna and Thierry. And we are transitioning to the official closing and vote of thanks. Please give a big hand of welcome to Ebrima, our Executive Director.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, stay around. Yeah. No, I just want to really, this was great. This was really great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to, first of all, CDD, Dauda, and the team for helping us to put this thing together. So I think they deserve a round of applause, CDD, for really, yeah. And they also worked with Ogo and Thierry to make sure that we got the report and get it printed within 24 hours, actually, or less. So it's really great. It's a partnership that starts many years ago. So we are really very pleased to be able to do this together again here.
Sorry, at the back, can we please have one meeting at the back?
Yeah.
Please. Thank you.
You know, I want to say there are so many things that came out in this discussion, but I want to go back to the paper tiger issue. Mao Zedong said, imperialism is a paper tiger, and that statement actually means that while foreign powers, particularly the US, appear terrifyingly powerful outwardly, they are internally weak, lack true mass support, and are destined to be defeated by the united strength of the people. Viewing them as fragile, stuffed figures that cannot withstand the wind and rain of a popular revolution. Okay? Exactly, strategic contempt. Now, he said also that it's actually a question of strategy and tactic. Strategically, Mao believed that revolutionaries should despise the enemy, therefore calling them paper tigers, to maintain morale. However, tactically, he acknowledged that specific battles require taking the enemy seriously to be able to win, and so on and so forth. So it's, I think it's important to... Jibo is talking to me about, but he's not saying what he was. Huh? No, but seriously, this was really, really good. I think we started off very well. talking about the context in which we are today. The world is in trouble. We are in big trouble. The disruptions are deep. The crisis is profound. It's multidimensional. It's multi-layered. And it is everywhere. There is no place where one can refer to, certainly not where we used to look towards, like, say, North America, Europe, as the places where you have democracy, you have universal values. I mean, all those things are gone. They're all down the drain now, right? A rule-based system that obviously wasn't meant to serve everyone, but even that rule-based system kept things moving for a time in a particular way, but even that one is broken down, okay? So there's a really, really serious concern, and it is actually painful. The pain of it is real, it's deep, and it's unequal. Pain is being meted out now, shamelessly, unapologetically, on so many people around the world. There's a song that says, "The revolution will not be televised." It's a song that, if you don't know, search it on YouTube, you'll find it. It's a beautiful song. What we are seeing today is actually the genocide being televised. The genocide is being televised. The wars have been televised. Kidnapping people in their own countries and taking them away is on television. It's been shown, and with no uneasiness of any kind at all. Bombing countries or threatening them. I'll do this to you if you don't do what I like. So we've gone back to the crudest forms of power relations. And so if imperialism, if anybody thought it was dead, I think you better open your eyes and look at what is happening today. So we are in a serious, serious situation today. And talking about organizing and not agonizing, I think the message for us, particularly we in the Global South, and in Africa in particular, is that we should be more serious about coming together, getting our act together as Africans, and organizing, because the world, as it is today, our only chance of surviving, forget it being about transformation and development, our chance of survival in the long term, is hinged upon our capacity to organize better, and to trust ourselves better, and to have greater confidence and faith in our own future, actually, and to reclaim it, also with no looking back, right? So this is really, really very important. And I think what we have seen, the panel was very good in the way it illustrated this problem. From different angles, from the children of Soweto, it's actually a privilege to have somebody who has been part of that struggle at that early age, Bongi, who is here today to talk about it, and who demonstrated that actually, you can do a lot. And she's done a lot. If you look at her bios on our website, this is somebody really very privileged to have as a board member, like all the others for that matter. But the point I was going to make is that that conversation connects very neatly and very well with the study on social movements. So I'd like to thank Haliba and Nicolette for the really deep, reflective, profound analysis they have carried out. It is extremely rich, it is very good, and that's why we thought it was important to launch it officially in a place like this one here today. Because the response to the disruptions we are talking about is actually being carried out by the movements on the ground. If anybody still believes in values and is trying to make sure that they don't disappear, the movements are doing it. Movements of young people, movements of women, movements for the environment, movement of solidarity of different kinds. Solidarity, a word that has been dirtied in all kinds of ways and made actually a taboo word today. You've seen that happen when G20 was being organized in South Africa. The South Africans are punished for getting solidarity in the theme that they had chosen for the G20 last year. So the movements are there. The movements are struggling. The movements are actually showing us what the world can be. Not only the world of today, but the world of tomorrow, what it can be. So it's really, really important. I would like to urge everybody to take time to read this study very carefully, and because it's extremely rich, and we can draw a lot from it. So, and all these movements, usually, actually, when you look at it, much of the struggles are actually about justice. It all turns about justice, fairness, justice, equity, dignity, right? And respect for everyone in their own rights. And that is, it speaks to what actually the African Union has chosen these days, I mean, for this decade now, justice for Africans and people of African descent. I think it's high time that we also, be bolder in terms of how we protect our own heritage, our own history, our own dignity, and how we claim our rightful place in this world, and our right to respect, simply respect, today and tomorrow, and make sure that there are secure futures, in the world to reimagine for our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren. So actually, social movements, in many respects, represent the hope that we can have in the future today, and they demonstrate resilience, creativity in the way they organize, and we've seen it. Somebody talked about NSARS. We've seen the Gen Z. We've seen Gen Z 2.2 in Morocco, and every time they appear in new forms in ways that nobody had thought they would be able to. And that's the beauty of it all, using technology, using all the different ways in which one can organize today and struggle. So again, thank you very much, Halima, and thank you for joining us online from all the way from South Africa. This is not the end of it. This study must continue. There are so many new issues to explore in a much deeper way. And we actually will be talking to you about how we think about this thing going forward, because we think this study should be, taken to new horizons, and we have to find ways of continuing it and maybe renewing it and updating it going forward every year. We'd like to thank those who supported us financially to get this study done. Those you mentioned, BRICS, the foundations, the Ford Foundation, Wallace Global Fund, Hewlett Foundation, but also all the others who are not giving us money for social movement specifically, but who are enabling us to do the work that we are doing. Talking about the Open Society Foundations, and Makato, Carnegie Corporation, all the others we are working with, who are supporting our work. We are hoping that this work will also one day be supported by many other African foundations, right? Because it's beautiful, it's very good that some kind of international solidarity is still expressing itself through philanthropy with all its problems. Philanthropy has a lot of problems. All the things we're talking about, there are a lot of issues in the way philanthropy works. But there are also some still very good things that are in philanthropy. And we are saying it is not only philanthropy coming from outside. There is giving in kind, in time, knowledge, resources, skills being shared by Africans. We share what we have. Maybe that's what is different from the way other institutional forms of philanthropy are functioning. People take time to accumulate money, and then they give away some of it. We, as Africans, tend to share what we have. And everybody is a philanthropist of sorts. I think the point has been made earlier on today. So this is really, really very important. I'd like to thank our board members who are here. We are in the context of a board meeting. Beginning with our chair, Kumba. Thank you for the beautiful introduction to this meeting. And thank you for the support all the way, not only here, but in the Barazas and in other forums, the African Philanthropy Forum and all the things we are doing. Thank you to Bongi, thank you to Janet, who was a board member, who is now with us, helping us to find ways of strengthening the organization and moving forward. Marwa, Anna, Hakim, Abdullah Jane, who was here, and all the others, right? I hope I haven't left out anyone among the current members. But anyway, everybody is recognized, and thank you for the support. I'd like to thank, of course, all the panelists. I have mentioned Dauda, who was there, Jibo. It was really good to get us started, but also to lead us in the way you did it. To remind us that actually, the struggle did not begin yesterday. It began a long time ago. It has always existed. People have always been struggling for space, for dignity, for freedom, for emancipation all along. And it takes different forms, and it expresses itself in different ways. And then people come in every generation. Fanon said they discover their mission. They also organize in the way that their times may get them to organize. They call themselves something, I don't want to use the names. You've been using names and labels. But labels, you wrote a paper on labels, so you can continue talking about it. But just to say that, I think it's important that we remember that we come from a long way. And part of the challenge today is to connect that history of struggles from, again, the children of Soweto, the Steve Bikos and them, you know, the Ben Bellas, the old Lumumbas, Kwame Nkrumah, Cheikh Job, all of them, those of them who have been struggling, you know, and make sure that the current generations know them, that you know where we come from, that you know other people have been in the trenches before, that this thing didn't start today. And it is on that knowledge that we can build and imagine new ways of organizing going forward. This struggle doesn't end, it continues all the time in the ways that are appropriate, corresponding to the times. Again, yeah, what I just want to say now is, thanks to the staff of Trust Africa who helped in and who've been mobilized all along. Before we got here, those in Dakar still, Fatoumata, the finance guys, right here in the room, Dehadi, Fakumba is here, Abda, communications. Mishar has been active with the social movements program a long time, all the time was actually. Cherry is in it. I mentioned Abda and the communications team, and everybody else, whether I mention them or don't mention them, people in programs, specific programs have been contributing to this work all along. So thanks everyone. And thanks to you all for coming and for being, you know, here with us today. We know your time is very precious. It was a pleasure reconnecting with friends, Latif, and all the others. You know, really pleasure to see that you are still there. And you are not going to leave each other anytime soon. And we've met in so many different forms. I remember the last time we met, I think it was at the Thabo Mbeki Foundation conference where he was talking to us about rebuilding, the need to rebuild Carthage. You remember his speech in Johannesburg. Mbeki saying, the metaphor of Africa, of the African challenge is the challenge to rebuild Carthage. Carthage, for those who know, is a city in Tunisia that was so prosperous that for 150 years, the Romans were struggling to find a way of defeating them because they were jealous after it. So Africa had that heritage, that beauty, that prosperity. You know, and my response, my paper, I talked about not only the challenge to rebuild Carthage, but also the challenge to rebuild Timbuktu. Because Timbuktu had the same experience. A very vibrant intellectual city, intellectual life, that provoked the jealousy of some people in North Africa. I don't want to mention the country, because it may create some misunderstandings. But who came and raided Timbuktu, take their intellectuals away, and got them to be teaching in their own institutions elsewhere. It was a place where people came to for learning from all over the world. So we have something to be proud of. We have a rich history, and we have energy still. We have hope. We have the resources. Why would we allow people to come and define for us what a critical mineral is? You know, we were talking about this in our meeting earlier today. Why do we let people come and make sure that, you know, they define for us what our priorities are, and they take, you know, they guide us to do what, you know, we think we want to is important for us. So again, thanks everyone. I will not close before ending thanking two of my colleagues who are my right and left hand, if I may put it that way. Aita is leading the operations team and making sure that silently and quietly everything is happening and is kept together and is moving in the right direction. Thank you very much for being here and for all the things that you are doing with no wahala. You know, it's great. And Briggs, the social movements program, he is the programs director leading all the programs work, coordinating it, but he also is personally the one who's been leading the social movements work and has been, you know, working with Halima and Nicolette all the way. And we really are very proud that we have got this report of quality. I think it's coming out very beautifully. And this is not the end of it. There are a lot of illustrations, so we'll be re-editing it with all the illustrations that we want to put in there, highlights of some of the things that came out in the barazas that we have organized. Barazas are convenings that we organize periodically. Did it in Harare, did it in Johannesburg, did it in Accra last year, and the next one, it may be in Cape Verde, it may be somewhere else. But we are continuing this work because it's one of our main pillars of work, and so stay tuned. So again, thank you very much. Thanks to the cameramen and the communications people who are helping us, all the people who are helping us to do this, and media people who are around, from Amani TV to all the others who are here or who may be elsewhere, and to all those who contributed to the conversation. This conversation will continue. We'll find appropriate ways of making sure that it happens. And we invite you to a reception out here so that we can continue the conversation informally. And and again, thanks to our hosts, Charmaine, Jibo, CDD, and all the others who are here in the room. Have a great evening. We'll be in touch again.
A big hand to Ebrima for his leadership and even the insistence that we must have events like this each time we are hosting our board meetings, which has become a culture at Trust Africa, and I think we all feel the value, we get the value. So thank you, Ebrima, for your leadership and for all those words. Earlier, this is the last important thing I'll say. Earlier, the insight was that Prof. Jibo must write a book about the 80s. Now I think it must be co-authored. Thank you, Halima and Nicolette. We can release you. All of us here are invited to a reception. Thank you, thank you. You can join us for the reception as well. Thank you. Thank you. No,
Thanks,
this was
everyone.
fantastic. Thank you. I missed the Mao quotes that you just shared. Can you please, strategic content, and I need those ones. And then tactical